March 1945, a requisitioned hotel near Trier, Germany. Rain slicks the cobblestones outside, but inside, the lobby is warm. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over polished brass and mahogany. American officers move through the foyer, laughing and heading toward the Third Army Officers Club. First Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka approaches the entrance. His Class A uniform is immaculate. The Distinguished Service Cross hangs heavy on his chest. He reaches for the door handle, but a major steps into his path. The major looks at the lieutenant's face and shakes his head. He says this club is for American officers only. He says the members will not be comfortable. Tanaka has fought through the Gothic line, but here, he is told to leave. The major thinks he is protecting a social standard. He is about to discover that George S. Patton values a different kind of pedigree. This is the story of what happened when George S. Patton discovered a decorated combat hero being barred from his own officers' club and decided to host a dinner that no one in the Third Army would ever forget. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show when the uniform is the only skin that matters. First Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka was 26 years old. He called San Francisco, California, his home. He served with the legendary 442nd Regimental Combat Team, a unit made of men whose loyalty was tested by fire, while their families were held behind barbed wire. In 1942, as Tanaka prepared for war, his parents and his sister were sent to the Manzanar internment camp. He fought for a country that did not yet trust his own blood. He broke the Gothic line in Italy and earned the Distinguished Service Cross. He carried 2 silver stars and 3 purple hearts on his chest. He was a man of 4 languages, often briefing generals and bridging the gap between divisions across the continent. Yet, for all his valor, he lived with a quiet and persistent wound. Every time he approached an American officers' club, he was reminded that his uniform could not change his face. He had been turned away so many times that he had simply stopped asking to enter. Standing in his way was Major Robert Caldwell. He was 42 years old, an officer from Atlanta, Georgia, who served as an assistant G1. Caldwell had never heard the whistle of an incoming shell or felt the freezing mud of a frontline foxhole. He was a man of the rear echelon, assigned to manage the club because of his social pedigree and connections. His grandfather had presided over the Atlanta Country Club for 2 decades, and Caldwell brought those exclusive sensibilities to the ruins of Germany. He viewed the officers' club as the last bastion of civilized standards in a chaotic and dirty world. His shoes were always polished to a mirror shine, and his uniform was tailored to perfection, untouched by the grime of battle. He believed that leadership was a matter of birthright and social standing rather than tactical merit. To Caldwell, an officer was defined by the appropriate background. That background did not include men like Tanaka. He had already barred 7 decorated veterans from the facility, convinced he was maintaining the dignity of the United States Army. By March 1945, the war in Europe was entering its final, chaotic phase. The Third Army was driving deep into the Rhineland, pushing past the Saar River and shattering the last organized German defenses. Towns fell in rapid succession. The speed of the advance left the rear echelon scrambling to secure supply lines and establish order in the wake of the armored columns. In places like Trier, ancient towns became sudden nerve centers for the American occupation. Intact buildings were rare, and any hotel or estate that survived the artillery shelling was immediately requisitioned for military use. This rapid expansion created a strange duality behind the front lines. While infantry units fought through concrete bunkers and muddy trenches, administrative staff set up comfortable bubbles in the rear. In these newly conquered spaces, the social codes of the United States found a new home. The Army remained deeply divided by race and custom. Many white commanders simply ignored the systemic exclusion happening under their noses, viewing the management of social clubs as a trivial matter compared to the logistical nightmare of fueling an army. They let rear echelon officers run these facilities like private country clubs from back home. They allowed decorated combat veterans to be humiliated at the door because it was easier than confronting the prejudice within their own ranks. For months, this quiet exclusion went unchallenged by the officers who held the power to stop it. It was a pattern that repeated across every theater of the war, a silent agreement to keep certain men outside the gates. Back in the lobby of the requisitioned hotel in Trier, That pattern had just played out once again. Captain Williams, a 30-year-old from Philadelphia, stood in the center of the office. He was Tanaka's liaison counterpart and had witnessed the incident from the lobby. He found Major Caldwell adjusting the silver trays on a sideboard. Williams did not wait for a greeting. He asked why a decorated lieutenant had just been barred from the building. Caldwell did not stop his work. He said he had made a command decision regarding the club's environment. Williams asked if the decision was based on military regulation or personal preference. Caldwell said the two were often the same when it came to maintaining order. Williams asked what order was maintained by insulting a man with a Distinguished Service Cross. Caldwell turned around and adjusted his cuffs. He said medals for bravery did not translate to social compatibility. Williams said Tanaka was an American citizen and a commissioned officer. Caldwell said that while the government might grant a title, it could not change a man's stock. Williams asked if the major was really refusing service based on race. Caldwell said he was refusing service based on the comfort of his members. Williams asked who those members were that feared a hero in their midst. Caldwell said they were men of the appropriate background who did not wish to dine with the Orient. Williams said the lieutenant had bled for the dirt they were currently standing on. Caldwell said that was what soldiers were paid to do, but it did not mean they had to be invited to the table. Williams asked if Caldwell realized how much Tanaka had sacrificed while the major managed a wine cellar. Caldwell told him that his family had run the finest clubs in Atlanta for 3 generations, and he knew where a man belonged. Williams asked if he intended to maintain this policy regardless of the lieutenant's rank. Caldwell said the policy was absolute and would not be bent for a single liaison officer. Williams said he hoped the major was prepared to defend that stance to someone with more stars. Caldwell said he was confident in his connections and his social standing. Williams did not say another word. He saw the polished shoes and the uncreased uniform and realized the major lived in a world where combat was a rumor. He left the room and went straight to the field headquarters. He sat at a typewriter and recorded every detail of the exchange. He attached Tanaka's citation for the Gothic line to the top of the folder. He hand-delivered the file to the general's aide and waited. The report reached Patton within the hour. Patton's jeep pulled up to the hotel entrance. The stars on his helmet caught the late afternoon light. He stepped out, his ivory-handled revolvers visible at his waist. He walked through the lobby with a steady, purposeful gait. He entered the dining room unannounced. 80 officers stood at attention as the room fell silent. Patton stood before Major Caldwell. He asked if the major was the one who had defined the entry requirements for this facility. Caldwell confirmed he was. Patton asked if he had personally ordered a lieutenant of the 442nd to leave the premises. Caldwell said he had, citing the comfort of the other officers. Patton asked if the major found the presence of a Distinguished Service Cross uncomfortable. Caldwell struggled for an answer. Patton asked if the major believed his civilian social connections overrode the commission of the United States Army. Caldwell looked at his polished shoes and whispered that he was just maintaining the club's standards. Patton looked at the major with a cold, blue stare. He said he had spent the afternoon reading the service record of the man the major had insulted. He mentioned the Gothic line and the bloodshed in the Vosges Mountains. He said while the major was concerned with the vintage of the wine, Tanaka was leading men through a hail of lead. He told Caldwell that in this army there were no social registers. There were only those who fought and those who did not. He said that a man who carries the Distinguished Service Cross has already passed every entrance exam that matters. He said that Tanaka's citizenship was written in his own blood on the soil of Europe. He noted that the enemy they were fighting believed in the same purity that the major was trying to enforce. He said it was a bitter irony to find a man in an American uniform practicing the very bigotry they had crossed the ocean to destroy. He said the major was a failure as an officer. He pointed to the center of the dining room. He said he was going to sit at the largest table with the lieutenant. He told the major he would act as their waiter. He said the major would serve the best steaks and the finest champagne in the cellar. He would do it with a smile. He gave the major one final choice. He could serve the dinner and learn what it meant to respect a hero, or he could be stripped of his rank and sent to a labor battalion before morning. He told him he had 5 seconds to decide. Major Caldwell stood rigid. his hands trembling as he brought the silver tray to the center table. General Patton had escorted First Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka into the very heart of the crowded dining room, pulling out the chair for the young officer himself. 80 white officers sat in absolute silence, watching the scene unfold under the glare of the chandeliers. The smell of seared steak and the pop of a champagne cork filled the tense air. Caldwell had to pour the sparkling wine into Tanaka's glass, his fingers fumbling with the bottle while the lieutenant sat composed, his medals catching the light. Patton spoke in a booming voice that echoed off the mahogany walls, asking Tanaka about his bravery on the Gothic line and the conditions of his family inside the Manzanar internment camp. Every man in the room heard the fluent, clear cadence of Tanaka's responses. After the plates were cleared, Patton stood and announced that the club was now open to every commissioned officer, regardless of race or origin. He ordered Caldwell stripped of his assignment and sent to a quartermaster depot in North Africa by morning. The major could only stare at the empty table, his social kingdom completely dismantled. Kenji Tanaka returned to San Francisco after the war ended. He found his family reunited after their release from Manzanar, and together they rebuilt their lives in California. He rarely spoke of his combat exploits or the medals he earned, but he kept a single item on his desk until his death in 1984. It was the menu from that night in Trier, signed by George S. Patton. The memory of that dinner reminded him that his citizenship had been validated by the highest authority in the field. Robert Caldwell spent the remaining months of the war managing a dusty quartermaster's supply depot in the heat of North Africa, far away from the luxury and high society he cherished. After his discharge in 1946, he returned to Atlanta, but his family's social connections could not shield him from a rapidly changing world. He lived out his remaining years in quiet bitterness, frequently complaining to his old associates about how the old military traditions had vanished. He died in 1973, never truly understanding why his exclusive standards had failed him. General Patton never recorded the incident in his public diaries or mentioned it to the press. The typewritten report from Captain Williams remained in his private desk, tucked away beneath operational maps. However, in a letter to his wife written shortly before his death in December 1945, he noted that a uniform is the only skin that matters when a man is under fire. Some historians have argued that Patton's dramatic interventions were calculated theatrical performances designed to reinforce his own legendary status, rather than rectify deep systemic inequality across the military branches. They suggest that a single high-profile confrontation did little to dismantle the pervasive prejudices embedded throughout the Army bureaucracy during the war. Others have argued the opposite, maintaining that in a rigid military hierarchy, such an overt and uncompromising stance from a legendary commander sent a powerful shockwave through the ranks, proving that battlefield merit superseded racial barriers. What is certain is that the posted directive remained an unyielding policy, forever changing the culture of that command. If you had been in Patton's position, would you have made such a public example of the major, or would you have handled the prejudice more quietly? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about when the uniform is the only skin that matters, make sure to subscribe.